Welcome to the OD Learning Lab, a podcast where we explore the intersection of adult learning, leadership, and organization development. I'm your host, Dr. Kyle Znamenak, faculty in the Leadership and Organization Development program at the University of Idaho. This is your space to learn, reflect, and experiment with ideas that shape how we lead and grow in today's organizations. We'll dive into real-world strategies, research, and conversations with scholar practitioners and professionals who are pushing the field forward. Whether you're in higher education, nonprofit, corporate, or public service, if you're passionate about leading change and learning for impact, this lab is for you. Let's explore, let's grow, and welcome to the OD Learning Lab. In today's episode of the OD Learning Lab, I'm excited to share a conversation I had with Holly. She has over 14 years of experience in the healthcare field and currently focuses on physician coaching and leadership development. So the topic of our conversation is going to be very much on coaching. Her work supports clinicians in growing, not just as providers, but as leaders within complex healthcare systems. This was a pre-recorded interview we did at a local coffee shop, so the background noise is real, but so is the wisdom that Holly brings to the table. Let's dive into the conversation.
All right, so we are recording right now. So can you tell me a little bit about your background and what led you to coaching?
Sure. My background's actually in college administration. So that's what I got my master's in is like higher ed administration education. And then I stayed in that for a brief time and then found myself into healthcare. And then I started working for the physician coaching program. I really found a passion for the content itself. It has a lot to do with leadership development, which is obviously my background, your background as well, extracting one's own potential. So it was a very unique way of being present with people. And I just got fascinated by it, looked into classes and got my certification and started coaching for the healthcare institution I worked for.
Nice. So was it like the institution themselves we're looking for someone to do coaching?
Yeah, actually, the institution has kind of two different focuses for coaching. They have a pretty well-established coaching program, which is, fantastic. Mm-hmm. So they have a coaching vein that coaches specifically for physicians. So they teach physicians to coach other physicians, which is just fascinating. And as much as coaching isn't about telling or advice giving, there is kind of that shared experience when a physician coaches another physician that is beneficial and kind of maybe it would lead to some different unique kind of questions. And then they also have a vein that is non-physicians that coach anyone. Could be physician leaders, could be administrative leaders as well. And that's what I engage in. I do a little assessment with them. I do a little coaching with them. And have, a client list that I keep up through the year.
What certification process did you go through? What was that like?
Sure. And it's definitely evolved over the years. But the big two camps are a board certified coach, which is BCC, which I have. And then there's ICF, International Coaching Federation, which if you Google coaching, that's what's going to come up. It's definitely made itself like the gold standard in coaching. That one's a little more intense. It takes a longer time to pursue. There's a lot more oversight. Where the BCC is something you can get over the course of a year and a half. The thing I liked most about it is I met people from across the world and still am in close contact with a lot of them and do coaching with them. Peer coaching, pro bono, just as friends. And so I've gotten to meet a lot of different people in my program. And my program also, I can build on it and get more certifications and types of things. I get that base board certification, but I could also get a focus in couples coaching, or you could they like a Christian vein if you wanted to do Christian coaching and how that plays into it. Or a bunch of different other ones that you can, anything you can think of, you can kind of focus in on that style of coaching. The funny thing is about coaching is you don't have to adapt any specific model. It's great to learn about all the different models, but you're going to find one that you gravitate towards. And no one model is best, but what you find out is it kind of like goes with your style of coaching. So one of the classes I teach, or one of the sessions I teach, which I kind of adapt to, is notion of challenge and support, which is big in higher education development. I'm sure big in psychology, big across education in general. Stanford's model of challenge and support. So that there's this kind of sweet spot of the level of challenge and support where growth happens. That's what coaching is a lot to me. It's about setting the table. That's what I called level setting with your client. to have them expect that you're going to challenge them. And that's where the stretching comes from. That's where creating the gap comes from. And that's where really the insight and the growth happens from. So everyone kind of has their own thing that they gravitate towards. I know a lot of people who do use the GROW model. It's fantastic. There's also quite a bit of models that you're kind of, not even model goals, but psychological theories that you're tested on. When you get your certification, being able to identify where people are on these growth patterns is very helpful for the types of questions you might ask them and the different ways you may challenge them.
Who are your typical clients? What kind of business do they bring to coaching?
Sure. So my typical clients are in the healthcare field. That's where I work. That's where people come to me. So they're all very driven individuals as a start. They're all people who have found different ways to be successful. And in the corporate world, you can imagine there's many different ways to get stuck or to be unhappy or feel like you're not growing. So those are the people who come to me. And, everyone's goals are different. If you were to do a values exercise and you go into it and the people who are participating, end up getting down to these 3 values and they think that, man, everyone's got to have the same values I have, right? And never, ever, ever, ever. That's always different. So everyone comes to coaching with this totally different history, all of these different values and backgrounds. And it's our job to pull that out. And that's where the growth is going to happen. By saying things like, I know your time with family is very important to you. And yet I'm hearing you talk about wanting to spend more time doing work things after hours. Can you tell me a little more about that congruency? How is it affecting your day to day? I feel the anxiety like seeping off of you. Am I feeling that right? And that's what it's all about, seeking out those incongruencies. And that's why coaching is exciting, because you go in thinking you've got it all figured out, and you never do. And same for them. They come into coaching thinking they have it all figured out, and they never do. But I will say themes about being more productive, having more time for their family, I think those are just universal themes.
So how do you build trust and rapport with new clients or just clients in general?
There's definitely some tried and true ways that help. But I always think that as a collaborative discussion works best for that topic itself. So how do you build trust? There's, the very basic way of doing that, and that's showing up. So keeping your appointments, scheduling ahead, not canceling as much as you can, and being present with them, listening, not being distracted during the appointment itself. The being present is such a big one. Asking the poignant questions because you're listening. It seems so that builds trust. Asking that question that shows you are listening, that makes them think. All of those little drops build that trust in that relationship. And knowing that they can come to you and share things with you in a confidential space. So we try our best to set the table ahead of time, but several times throughout my engagements with people say, this is a confidential space. You can feel comfortable sharing with me.
So you mentioned confidentiality. I'm kind of curious about, being an internal coach working for the organization,
Yep.
And then your clients being internal, how do you deal with confidentiality?
We put up some pretty big barriers from the start, to the point where I can tell you if your client is coming to coaching sessions and if they're engaged. That's about it. That's my expectation, that a client is going to have continued conversations with their supervisor, with their boss, with their team. It's not my place to do that. And if I were to coach an external client, someone who just, found me and wanted coaching, and I'm not tied to their organization or anything, it'd be the same thing. You can tell me, I'm not going to go talk to how would I even know who their boss is, I guess, unless they decided to share that with me. But that's the expectation of confidentiality. You do get into some legalese a bit. So a lot of coaches don't take detailed notes. I don't take a lot of notes. I maybe write down if I hear, prime example, someone who uses the word should a lot. That's definitely an opportunity to push back and challenge a coachee. So if I hear that word a lot, or any word, or I can't, I never, all these generalizations, I may scribble that word on a sheet of paper. But if someone were to look at those notes, or if they were ever discoverable in any kind of situation, they wouldn't know anything that's going on. But so it also helps being able to keep that confidentiality up. The onus does go on to the coachee or the client or whatever nomenclature you're going to use. And that's the beauty about coaching is I'm not owning any I'm not owning any of that. I'm not your accountability buddy. You're gonna have your meeting with me in a few weeks. And that's how I approach them. Like, what do you want to accomplish by the next time we meet? Not tell them, but I'll remind them. I'm just like, if you want to write these down. But most of my clients, they're already writing. They're already scribbling. It just depends. And it's up to them. And then you have the next meeting in a few weeks and you say, okay, what were you able to accomplish since we talked last? And that's the dynamite question. What have you been able to put into place since we last talked? And they'll say, I would just like I wanted to. I was able to do A, B, and C. Or they might come to and say, you know what, that didn't really get off the ground. But no, I'm not owning any of that. I can't. That's not my role in the situation at all. Judgment-free zone. We did not talk about that. So that is a phenomenal way to build trust. Get to that point where maybe they share something that they haven't shared with a lot of people. Maybe an opinion, maybe a value that maybe they don't think aligns with the world, their community, whatever it may be. Just being neutral and not being judgmental about any of the things they bring to the table builds tons of trust. And that helps them be comfortable enough to say, I didn't get a lot done in the last 3 weeks. And I say, okay, what got in the way? How neutral is that? I mean, that's a phenomenally neutral question. It's not like, why didn't you do that? Why isn't this done? What were you doing those 3 weeks that you didn't get anything done? No. What got in the way?
Yes.
And it invites them to answer, well, this happened. And it's, again, a wonderful springboard to have a coaching conversation. So judgment-free is so very important.
How do you shift your expert brain? How do you shut that off? Because it's like sometimes we want to just give advice. How do you stay within the coaching mindset?
It's a skill. It's a tough skill. I mean, we're all human. We all think we have the answers to everyone else's problems. So being able to shut that off and just being neutral. Because the other thing is I don't want to influence that conversation. The coachee, the client knows where that conversation should go. The client knows what they want to focus on. Our favorite phrase as a coach, one of the most famous phrases as a coach is, what else? Someone gives a suggestion, you say, what else? Okay, what else? What else? And you come up with this list of every possible thing you could do as a next step. And then when you feel like you've exhausted that all, just, what do you think you'd like to do first? 9 times out of 10, it's not the thing that you think that they're going to pick. That brain to get past the superficial. It's about going deeper. So my opinion of the situation at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what I think. It doesn't matter. There's some freedom in that. Mm-hmm. And it's something you definitely have to get over. It's something you have to let go. That it doesn't matter what I think. It doesn't matter if I think they're doing the right thing or the wrong thing. It's their world. It's their problem. It's their issues, and it's their solutions. The more you take classes, the more you practice, the better that gets. Because when a novice coach comes in, they're giving a lot of advice. That's all they want to do. They want to, and it's funny because this is the most these types of interviews or discussions are where you actually talk about coaching. When you're in sessions, I barely talk. I tell people that from the get-go. I'm like, this is the most you'll hear me talk is in this intro session. Because you don't. You just pause and do a lot of listening and let them bring things to the table. And there's been some rare occasions where I might give some advice. And a lot of that has to do with, for instance, us working for the same organization and me knowing the tools that are available, or me maybe having some connections that are available. Mm-hmm. So if I were to do that, which I said, again, it was very rare, I will say some things like, pause for a second, I'm going to take off my coaching hat and put on my mentorship hat. I'll call it out, mentorship hat or advice giving hat just for a second. Is that okay with you? And always check for permission, another way to build good trust. And they'll say yes, or maybe they'll say no, I don't know. But I'll just say, what you're describing, I know there's this program where I work that maybe you would benefit from. So those are kind of the situations where I take off that hat. I did have a client a couple months ago who was really struggling with organization and Outlook. So Outlook emails, and we've all picked up tips over the ages. And I did put my advice hat on, and I just said, I'm going to share a little bit with you if you don't mind. Like, I used to struggle with something similar, and I can't remember, it was rules or something. I was able to, like, hasn't even explored rules to get different, like, emails from different people into different folders. I'm like, maybe, like, could we look at rules a little bit? Those little tidbits of advice. And, like, I've known this client for over a year and a half, so it's a little different than me just telling them what to do the whole time. But few and far between, there will be some scenarios where I take that hat off. There's also that conversation that every coach dreads, where maybe they've reached the end of their expertise when someone might need counseling. I've had that conversation too. That's more of an advice giving conversation, but it is one where you take that hat off and you just say, I think what you're describing, is beyond my expertise, and I'm wondering if counseling might be better for that specific thing. How does that feel? How does that land on you? Always checking back for understanding, and that checking back, that non-judgment, additional ways to build trust. I'm going to just keep going back to that as we layer on more ways there. As a long-winded answer, but there are scenarios where you take that hat off, but very few and very far between.
What's one coaching story or client breakthrough that stands out to you?
That's a really good question, because you have a lot of mini breakthroughs in any group coaching relationship. I think the most impactful one for me came from one of my physicians that I was coaching, and I still coach this physician. We're very, very close. Normally, your coaching engagements last 6 months, 9 months. However, so this physician was struggling a lot with work-life balance, and a newer physician, so eager to move up, eager to take on more responsibilities, eager to push his research further and further, and had a new baby. So a new baby, under a year old, obviously loved his family, pretty engaged, but at the same time would find himself staying up past midnight, 1, 2 in the morning, working on research. So, tired. I can only imagine the strain that was going on at home. And he comes to me just, I have to publish more, and I have to say yes to my boss all the time. Like, if they ask me to do something, I have to say yes. And I'm paraphrasing it, with a lot of things that new professionals struggle with. Not putting up any kind of boundaries, thinking that saying yes to everything is what's going to get you ahead. I have to do so many publications a year, because I have to establish myself, and I have to do all these things. And we got to a point in the conversation, I can't remember what led up to it exactly, but we got to a point in the conversation where I asked something along the lines of, is that more important than your family? It sounds like a judgmental question, but I assure you, working up to it, it wasn't, because we were going on, and it was almost like I at one point, I feel like I had to pit them against each other, and I'm like, I'm going to challenge you. Is that more important than your family? And there was just such a space. He was crying, and he's just like, no, it's not. The conversation was able to shift to ways he was going to prioritize his family, and then what was he going to have to say no to or ask for help? How to ask for help. So we were able to make a big shift there, and I can tell you, he still does a lot of research. He's still very engaged with his family, but he was able to really prioritize that if it doesn't fall into one of these categories, he's got to decline. And he was able to do that. And he spoke with his wife about that too, and level set it with them, and said, I'm going to start saying no more. If something is this type of ask, though, I do have to say yes. I feel like I do. So he's able to have better communication with his wife, more time with his family, and better balance out. And eventually he was able to advocate for more admin time. But that was a real turning point for him, and, a tough place to be for any young professional who's starting a family as well, because you're trying to gain that momentum in your career, and at the same time not wanting to sacrifice those precious years with your family. So that was probably the most impactful coaching moment for me.
I'm going to call it intervention. Just those are my words. So it seems like the intervention there, from what I'm understanding, is that you looked at two values.
Mm-hmm.
When you asked that question, you were saying which value are you holding more, like which one's more important to you? Can you tell me a little bit more about that approach that you took?
That's a very good way to put it. Because that's what you do. You pull out goals, motivations, and values in your conversations. So you can get to a point where you say, I know your family, your new family is so very important to you. And I keep hearing that you're staying up past midnight working on this. Is this research more important than your family? And the coach, you don't use a lot of closed-ended questions. And sometimes it's a tool. So an intervention, as you use those words, I use the word challenge. And when I teach coaches, new coaches about challenging your coachee, which they're terrified to do, because it's just like, oh no. I have them define what challenge means to them, and it helps. Which is what you would do with any client anyways. What does challenge mean to you? And to me, it means unlock deeper thinking. I don't think of it something as adversarial. It's just putting up that mirror for them to see what's going on. Younger coaches want to have all the answers. They want to have all their questions lined out. They're thinking of a question 5 minutes ahead of time. I don't come with a plan. And it just kind of came to that head. I just notice the incongruency, and you call it out any way that works best, any way that does. And then you check with them. How did that land on you? That's a phrase I use all the time. How did that land on you? Am I getting that right? Would you describe it differently? Any of those phrases. And I can't tell you how many times I've shed tears during someone coaching me. It just happened. You're unlocking all this emotion, this raw emotion, and it happens. It's not a bad thing. To use empathy, and empathy being putting yourself in someone's shoes. And that's one part of it. Feeling is just the first part. Expressing it is the coach's tool. It's like, I can't even imagine being in that position. Or, it sounds terrifying. I see tears. Tell me about that. Or relating. So empathy is a good tool to do that reflection back. I am always checking in on those emotions, on those feelings, on vibes, whatever you want to call them. That's a big part of my coaching, where I just say, like, I'm feeling. What I often do is, at the end of a coaching session, I'll say something like, you seem so much lighter than you were when you joined the conversation, or you seem so much happier. Even your voice tone has gone up since, and that's just the things we're trained to observe for. And then I check for understanding, like, do you feel that way too? And a lot of times, oh yeah, I feel weightless. I'm like, wow, that must have really been weighing heavily on you. And emotions, feelings, that's all very, very important to the coaching conversation. A good activity for someone who maybe has a lot of anxiety or just stress that they're holding in their body is just having them identify it. Just be like, okay, I hear you say the word anxiety. Where does that normally show up? And for me personally, it shows up in my chest, but not for everybody. Some people it shows up in their stomach, some people it shows up in their head, wherever that may be. Let's talk about it. Let's go behind the waterfall. Let's examine it. Look at this. Okay. When do you normally feel it coming on? How intense is it? What color is it? Whatever you can do to name that. And I'll say I rarely do any actual face-to-face coaching, and I still feel things over the internet. So like Teams or Zoom style coaching. Yeah. Teams or Zoom coaching, and honestly, the way I was trained with my program, we usually turn our screens off when it comes time to coaching. Not everyone does that. I do that. So you be a better listener, because I'm not focused on what the person looks like or like. There are some advantages to saying, oh, you grimaced, or whatever that may be. However, me as well, I'm able to relax a little more because I'm not worried about, oh, am I making a face? Or, oh, am I fidgeting too much? Whatever that may be.
What's something that surprised you or you learned through being a coach?
You approach so many different normal, mundane situations with a whole different perspective. And you find that your conversations with people go a lot differently, especially, we don't talk about it too much in coaching program and in leadership studies. Feedback, giving feedback, receiving feedback is such an important topic. Whether you're in, psych, whether in leadership development, education, whatever, I keep going to those fields. Ability to give and receive feedback is so important. And we all know there's people who are very good at it, people who are not so good at it. And coaching is so hand in hand with that. And just your ability to approach things non-judgmentally, your ability to be present with people, your ability to slow down and listen more. People who are in leadership studies probably, and maybe I'm speaking from my own experience, but I imagine it's fairly universal. You find that people gravitate towards you for help and to get connected. And when they're down, they gravitate towards these leaders, these people in college administration, and I find that more people come. It's just a different way of being with people. One of the things I learned is how much we use the word why in our language and how it puts people on the defensive. I don't use the word why too often at all anymore. That's one of the big changes I have.
Yeah.
And if you're a coach, if you're a training coach, you just do not ask a why question. If you take one thing away from this interview, do not ask people why. Here's an example. Well, why did you do it that way?
Yeah.
Well, that's right there. Ultimately you're like, what? Or again, when we come to okay, well, what got in the way? That's different. Or what were you able to put into practice since we last talked? Well, why didn't you get it done? I would never ask that. Never, never, never. I think was one of the biggest things I took away from that. But it's just, like I said, it's just a whole different way of being with people that really changes the way that you're able to communicate.
Any other advice?
Maybe seek out a coach. I know a lot of coaches will, their first session might be pro bono, or they'll do a little interview with you that might be pro bono. Meet a coach, get to know someone, maybe have a session or two to see how it feels. And if you really like that, I would encourage you, to explore a certification. And it will transform the way you communicate, especially going into leadership studies. It'll transform the way you communicate with, people above you and people who report to you, or it'll transform the way you approach problems. It'll really transform you. And those skills, even though you may not start an LLC or coach on the side or whatever it may be, it will transform the way that you approach things and the way that you're able to help people. And it's a skill set that will never leave you, no matter what field you end up, no matter what type of business, school, the healthcare system you end up at after you graduate. It won't leave you. You will use it every single time. I would just suggest exploring as much as you can and making your own model, the own way you approach things. And because there are benefits to, any different way you approach, and study these theories of growth, pull little bits and pieces from every one of them to make the coaching approach that is perfect for you. You should all read, and it's called Thanks for the Feedback. It's a phenomenal book, and it's not. I went into it thinking it was going to be about how to give better feedback, because that's what we all focus on, and people stink at giving feedback, but the book is actually more about how to receive feedback, and it's a perspective you don't get to read about that often. So it does, talk about a little bit about how to give feedback, but it's mostly how to receive feedback and how to be present and open. So go read that book. It's a phenomenal book. There's a lot of research behind it, so you get to read a lot of studies that people have done about feedback. And my favorite part is that even when it's off base, unfair, poorly delivered, and frankly, you're not in the mood. So it's a very realistic way of looking at feedback and looking at how to take feedback. So I would encourage everyone to read that book.
My conversation with Holly really drove home how powerful coaching can be, not just for individuals, but for how we work and lead. She shared why emotional intelligence, especially empathy, is such a game changer, and why lifelong learning and being fully present matter so much in the coaching space. These are the kinds of habits that can truly shift how we connect with others. If you have a question you want us to tackle in a future episode, or if you're a professional or academic who'd like to join us on the show, send me an email at odlearninglab@gmail.com. Again, that's odlearninglab@gmail.com. Remember to keep learning and leading, and I'll see you back in the lab.